The Galactic Council's annual interspecies cultural exchange was in full swing, and boy, was it a snooze fest. Picture this: a bunch of aliens from across the cosmos gathered in a sterile, over-air-conditioned conference hall, droning on about the intricate mating rituals of the blob people of Xenon 7. Fascinating stuff, really. I'd rather watch paint dry on a planet with no atmosphere. That's where I found myself. Zach Thompson, Earth's unofficial ambassador of what the hell did I just see? I was slumped in a chair designed for a species with 3 buttocks, nursing a drink that tasted like fermented sock juice. The things I do for intergalactic diplomacy. And now squeaked the master of ceremonies, a being that looked like a cross between a jellyfish and a desk lamp. We have a special presentation from the humans of Earth. Oh, right. That was my cue. I stumbled to my feet, nearly knocking over a Vrexian who was balancing precariously on what I can only describe as organic stilts. Sorry, buddy, I mumbled, receiving a series of clicks and whistles that my translator politely refused to decipher. I made my way to the stage, my footsteps echoing in the cavernous hall. The anticipation was palpable, and by palpable, I mean you could practically taste the indifference. Greetings, esteemed members of the Galactic Council, I began, trying to sound as diplomatic as possible. Today, I'd like to introduce you to a time-honored Earth tradition, a sport that has united and divided us for generations. I speak, of course, of arm wrestling. The silence that followed was so profound, I swear I could hear the collective confusion of 1,000 alien species. Arm wrestling, chirped a avian creature from the front row, its beak contorting into what I hoped was curiosity and not disgust. Yes, arm wrestling, I continued, warming to my subject. It's a test of strength, endurance, and the ability to look really, really constipated while gripping another person's hand. I gestured to my assistant, a burly Russian named Dmitri, who had been standing off to the side, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. Dmitri here will help me demonstrate. As Dmitri lumbered onto the stage, I could hear the muted gasps from the audience. You see, to most of the galaxy, humans are considered Deathworlders, creatures from a planet so inhospitable, so dangerously unpredictable, that our very existence is a biological middle finger to the cosmos. And Dmitri, well, he was the poster child for Deathworlders. 6.5 feet of muscle and beard, with hands that could crush a bowling ball. We took our positions at a small table I'd set up earlier. Now, the rules are simple, I explained, as Dmitri and I clasped hands. We start with our elbows on the table, grip each other's hand, and on the count of 3, we try to force the other person's hand down to the table. The first one to do so wins. The audience leaned forward, a mix of horror and fascination on their alien faces. I could practically see the thoughts running through their minds. They're going to rip each other's arms off. Is this some kind of ritual combat? Are all human greetings this violent? Ready, Dmitri, I asked. He grunted in response. Always the conversationalist, that one. 1, 2, 3, and with that we began. Now, I'd like to say it was an epic battle of titans, a clash that would be spoken of for generations to come. But let's be real, Dmitri had me beat in about 2 seconds flat. My arms slammed into the table with a thud that echoed through the hall. The reaction was immediate and intense. Half the audience recoiled in horror, while the other half erupted in a cacophony of alien exclamations. I'm pretty sure I saw one delegate faint, their tentacles going limp as they slid under their seat. And that, ladies, gentlemen, and assorted beings, I announced, rubbing my sore arm, is arm wrestling. The uproar that followed was deafening. Questions came flying from all directions, translated through my earpiece in a jumble of bewildered inquiries. Is this how you select your leaders? Are you not concerned about permanent damage to your exoskeletons? Do the losers get eaten? I held up my hands, trying to calm the frenzy. Whoa, one at a time, please. And no, we don't eat the losers, usually. A tall, willowy creature with skin like shimmering silk rose gracefully. I am Xilith of the Luminari. We are a peaceful race, dedicated to the pursuit of knowledge and harmony. This, arm wrestling. It seems so brutish, so primitive. Surely an advanced species such as yours has evolved beyond such displays of physical dominance. I couldn't help but laugh. Evolved? My dear Xilith, you clearly haven't been to a sports bar on Earth during football season. We're about as evolved as a banana slug with anger management issues. The Luminari's bioluminescent skin flickered in what I assumed was confusion or distaste. Probably both. But why, asked another alien, this one resembling nothing so much as a sentient fern? What purpose does this ritual serve? I pondered for a moment, trying to find the right words. Well, you see, humans have this weird thing about proving we're the best. The strongest, the fastest, the one who can eat the most hot dogs in 10 minutes without throwing up. Arm wrestling is just one of the many ways we've come up with to measure our worth against each other. Fascinating, murmured a gelatinous blob near the front. And is this a common practice among all humans? Oh, absolutely, I grinned. Walk into any bar on Earth and challenge someone to an arm wrestling match. You'll either make a new best friend or start a brawl. Sometimes both. The blob quivered in what I hoped was excitement and not the onset of a panic attack. A reptilian creature with scales that shifted color like an oil slick raised a clawed hand. You mentioned this as a sport. Are there professional arm wrestlers? You bet your scaly hide there are, I replied. We've got leagues, tournaments, even world championships. People train for years to be the best at slamming another person's arm into a table. The reptilian's scales turned a deep purple, which I later learned was their equivalent of a jaw drop, but the risk of injury sputtered a hovering cloud of gas that I'd been trying very hard not to make eye contact with all evening. Surely your medical professionals discourage such dangerous activities. I snorted. Discourage? Half the time, they're the ones organizing the matches in the hospital break room. You should see what happens when the orthopedic surgeons take on the neurosurgeons. It's like WrestleMania meets Grey's Anatomy. The gas cloud condensed slightly, which I took as a sign of distress. Or maybe it was just the air conditioning. It's hard to read the body language of a sentient vapor. I have a query, came a melodious voice from the back. A creature that looked like a cross between a butterfly and a grand piano fluttered forward. You say this is a test of strength, yet I observe that technique and strategy also play a role. Is this correct? Absolutely, I nodded, impressed by the insight. It's not just about raw power. Leverage, grip, even psychological warfare, it all comes into play. I've seen tiny grandmas take down bodybuilders through sheer technique and a lifetime of pent-up rage. The butterfly piano trilled in what I hoped was appreciation and not a mating call. You can never be too careful at these intergalactic mixes. Excuse me, rumbled a voice that sounded like gravel in a blender. A massive creature, easily twice Dimitri's size and looking like it was carved from living granite, lumbered forward. I am Grok of the Petrimorphs. We too value tests of strength, perhaps. A demonstration. The entire hall went silent. Even the ambient hum of the life support system seemed to hold its breath. Here was Grok, a being that could probably bench press a small moon, challenging the puny human to a contest of strength. I looked at Dimitri. Dimitri looked at me. We both looked at Grok. And then, because humans are nothing if not consistently terrible at risk assessment, I heard myself say, sure, why not? The buzz that went through the crowd was electric. Aliens of all shapes and sizes pressed forward, eager to witness what they probably assumed would be my gruesome demise. I could practically hear the thoughts racing through their minds. Is this how humans commit ritual suicide? Should we prepare a eulogy? I wonder if they'll let us study the remains. Grok settled into the chair across from me, the poor furniture creaking in protest under his massive frame. I couldn't help but notice that his bicep was roughly the size of my torso. This was going to end well. So, Grok, I said, trying to keep my voice from cracking, you've arm wrestled before, right? Grok's craggy face split into what I hoped was a smile, and not just a tectonic shift. We Petrimorphs have a similar contest. We call it crushing the mountains of our enemies, it is. Similar, yes. Yeah, sure, I gulped. Exactly the same. Just, try not to actually crush my bones into powder. I'm kind of attached to them. We clasped hands, or rather, I placed my comparatively tiny hand in Grok's stony grip. It was like arm wrestling a particularly aggressive cliff face. On 3, I squeaked. 1, 2, 3. I never got to 3 with a movement faster than anything that big had a right to be. Grok slammed my arm down onto the table. The impact was so forceful that the table split in 2, sending splinters flying across the stage. For a moment, there was absolute silence. Then, chaos erupted. Aliens were screaming, fainting, and in some cases, I'm pretty sure, spontaneously molting. The gelatinous blob from earlier had expanded to 3 times its size in what I can only assume was sheer panic. The gas cloud had condensed into a small, terrified rain cloud that was now drenching a very annoyed-looking Vrexian. And me. I was lying on my back, staring at the ceiling, wondering if it was possible to get a concussion in your arm. Grok's craggy face appeared above me, concern etched into his stony features. Are you functional, tiny human? I did not mean to damage your fragile form. I managed a weak thumbs up with my non-crushed arm. No worries, big guy. I've had worse from my niece's tea parties. As Dimitri helped me to my feet, I noticed something strange. The initial panic was subsiding, replaced by excitement. Aliens were chattering amongst themselves, gesticulating wildly, those that had appendages to gesticulate with anyway. The master of ceremonies fluttered onto the stage, its bioluminescent tentacles pulsing with barely contained enthusiasm. Extraordinary, it squeaked. Simply extraordinary. In all my cycles, I've never seen such a display of interspecies athleticism. I blinked, still a bit dazed. You're not horrified. Horrified? My dear human, we are electrified. This arm wrestling, it's brutal, yes, but also fascinating. The raw power, the technique, the sheer audacity of challenging a being 4 times your size. The alien paused, searching for the right word. It's very human. And just like that, the mood in the hall shifted. What had started as a demonstration of a quaint Earth custom had turned into the hottest new trend in the galaxy. Aliens were pairing up, trying to figure out how to arm wrestle with tentacles, pincers, and in one memorable case, psychic projections. The Luminari delegate glided over, her silken skin shimmering with excitement. I must admit, I was skeptical at first. But now I see the appeal. It's not just about strength, is it? It's about connection, about testing one's limits in a controlled environment. It's rather beautiful in its own way. I rubbed my sore arm, grinning despite myself. Yeah, I suppose it is. Just wait until I introduce you guys to hot dog eating contests. The rest of the evening was a blur of impromptu arm wrestling matches, interspecies cultural exchanges, and me trying to explain the finer points of technique to beings with anatomy I couldn't even begin to comprehend. I saw a Vrexian challenge a sentient plant to a match, their vine-like appendages tangled in what looked less like arm wrestling and more like an aggressive form of macrame. The gelatinous blob had formed itself into a crude approximation of an arm and was taking on all comers, its amorphous form proving surprisingly adept at the sport. Even Silith of the Luminari, who had been so dismissive earlier, was now engaged in an intense match with a robotic delegate from the Cybernetic Collective. Their contest was less about physical strength and more a battle of wills, with Zilith's bioluminescent glow pulsing in time with the robot's whirring servos. As the night wore on, I found myself at the bar because of course there was a bar, some things are universal, nursing a drink that tasted suspiciously like WD-40, but packed a punch like a small thermonuclear device. Grok lumbered over, his rocky frame causing minor tremors with each step. Tiny human, he rumbled, settling onto a reinforced stool beside me. I must apologize again for my earlier enthusiasm. I sometimes forget my own strength. I waved him off with my good arm. No harm done, big guy. Well, no permanent harm anyway. I'll just tell everyone back home I got this bruise fighting off a horde of space pirates. Grok's gravelly laugh shook the glasses on the bar. You humans are strange creatures, so fragile, yet so resilient. I've crushed moons with less force than I used on you, yet here you sit, joking and drinking, as if nothing happened. I shrugged, immediately regretting the movement as pain shot through my shoulder. That's kind of our thing. We're like those inflatable punch toys knock us down, we bounce right back up, usually with a bad attitude and a plan for revenge, but that's neither here nor there. The Petromorph regarded me thoughtfully, his crystalline eyes glinting in the low light of the bar. I begin to understand why your kind are called Deathworlders. It is not just your planet that is harsh, but your very spirits. You face challenges that would break others, and you do so with a smile and a jest. Well, when you put it like that, we sound downright inspirational, I chuckled. Don't let it fool you, though. For every noble human trait, we've got about a dozen really stupid ones to balance it out. I mean, we invented arm wrestling, but we also invented the Snuggie. Grok's craggy brow furrowed in confusion. Snuggie. Trust me, big guy, some Earth mysteries are better left unsolved. As we sat there, an odd pair sharing a drink at an intergalactic bar, I couldn't help but marvel at the situation. Here I was, a squishy little human from a backwater planet, rubbing elbows or whatever passed for elbows in Grok's case, with beings from across the cosmos. And all it took to bridge the gap was a simple contest of strength and will. The master of ceremonies fluttered over, its tentacles still pulsing with excitement. Gentle beings. It squeaked, "I cannot thank you enough for your presentation. It has been the talk of the conference. Several delegations have already expressed interest in incorporating arm wrestling into their own cultural practices. I nearly choked on my space WD-40. They what now?" The alien's bioluminescence flickered in what I was beginning to recognize as its version of a smile. "Oh yes, the Vrexians are particularly enthused. They're already discussing the possibility of a galactic arm wrestling league. Of course, some modifications will need to be made for species without arms, but the basic principle is sound." I exchanged a bewildered look with Grok. "A galactic arm wrestling league? You can't be serious." The master of ceremonies bobbed in what I assumed was the alien equivalent of an enthusiastic nod. "Oh, but I am. In fact, the Galactic Council is considering making it an official sport for the next Intergalactic Olympics." I blinked, trying to process this information. Let me get this straight. I come here to give a simple cultural presentation, nearly get my arm ripped off by Rocky the Friendly Boulder here. I jerked a thumb at Grok, who had the decency to look slightly abashed, and now you're telling me that arm wrestling is going to be an Olympic sport. On a galactic scale. Precisely, the alien chirped. Isn't it wonderful? We haven't had this much excitement at a cultural exchange since the Zorblaxians introduced their traditional mating dance, and we all know how that turned out. I didn't know. And I was pretty sure I didn't want to. But why, I asked, still struggling to wrap my head around the concept. I mean, it's just arm wrestling. It's not exactly the pinnacle of human achievement. The alien's tentacles wiggled in what I was beginning to recognize as its version of a shrug. Perhaps not, but it embodies so much of what makes your species fascinating to the rest of the galaxy. The combination of physical prowess and strategic thinking, the element of friendly competition, the way it brings individuals together. It's a microcosm of humanity itself, I snorted. A microcosm of humanity? Buddy, if you think arm wrestling represents the best of us, wait until you hear about our reality TV shows. But even as I said it, I had to admit there was a certain logic to the alien's words. Arm wrestling, for all its simplicity, did capture something essentially human. The desire to test ourselves, to connect with others, to engage in friendly or not so friendly competition. Maybe it wasn't such a bad representation of our species after all. Grok's gravelly voice interrupted my musings. I, for one, am honored to have participated in this human ritual. It has given me new respect for your kind, tiny human. Perhaps there is much our peoples can learn from each other. I raised my glass to the Petromorph. Couldn't agree more, big guy. Here's to interstellar arm wrestling and the weird places it might take us. As we clinked glasses, well, I clinked, Grok more. Crunched, I couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity of it all. Here I was, an accidental ambassador for humanity, having just introduced the concept of arm wrestling to the galaxy at large. What's next? Teaching aliens the finer points of pizza tossing. Introducing them to the subtle art of dad jokes. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of conversations, demonstrations, and more of that paint-stripping alien booze. I found myself at the center of attention, fielding questions from curious extraterrestrials about the finer points of arm wrestling technique. No, I explained to a puzzled Vrexian, its vine-like appendages tangled in knots. You don't actually try to eat your opponent's arm. That's a different sport entirely. The Vrexian's tendrils drooped in disappointment. Apparently, they'd been looking forward to a snack. Meanwhile, a group of floating crystal beings were attempting to arm wrestle by aligning their facets and vibrating at each other. It wasn't quite what I had in mind, but I had to admire their enthusiasm. As the night wore on, I found myself in an impromptu arm wrestling tournament with a motley crew of aliens. There was Xylith the Luminari, whose ethereal grace belied a surprisingly strong grip. A cybernetic collective robot, whose servo motors whirred with mechanical precision. And, of course, Grok, who had apparently decided that if he couldn't beat me fairly, he'd wear me down through sheer persistence. The final match came down to me and a being that looked like a cross between a jellyfish and a disco ball. its translucent tentacles wrapped around my hand, pulsing with bioluminescent light. "Prepare yourself, human," it burbled, its voice sounding like it was coming from underwater. "I have calculated the optimal angle and pressure to achieve victory." I grinned, tightening my grip. "Yeah? Well, I've got something better than calculations. I've got good old-fashioned human stubbornness." The match began, and immediately I realized I might have underestimated my gelatinous opponent. Its grip was like iron, if iron were made of jello and lit up like Times Square. We strained against each other, neither gaining the upper hand. The crowd around us had grown, aliens of all shapes and sizes cheering us on in a cacophony of clicks, whistles, and what I'm pretty sure was interpretive dance. I could feel my arm trembling with effort, sweat beading on my forehead. Just when I thought my arm was about to give out, I remembered something my old high school wrestling coach used to say: "When in doubt, kid, just pretend your opponent insulted your mother's cooking." And with a surge of indignation, on behalf of my mom's slightly overcooked but lovingly prepared meatloaf, I summoned one last burst of strength. Slowly, inexorably, I began to push the alien's arm back. The jellyfish disco ball hybrid pulsed with alarm, its bioluminescence flashing like a strobe light on overdrive. But it was too late. With a final push, I slammed its gelatinous appendage onto the table. The room erupted in cheers, tentacles, and in one case, spores. I stood up, raising my arms in victory, only to immediately regret it as every muscle in my body screamed in protest. As the excitement died down and the aliens began to disperse, still chattering excitedly about the new sport they'd discovered, the master of ceremonies approached me once again. "Human Zach," it said, its tentacles twirling in what I'd come to recognize as its version of a smile, "I must thank you again for this incredible contribution to our cultural exchange. You've single-handedly revolutionized interspecies relations." I rubbed my sore arm, grinning despite myself. "Happy to help. Though I've got to warn you, if arm wrestling catches on, you might want to invest in a good physiotherapist, preferably one with experience in about 1,000 different anatomies." The alien's bioluminescence flickered in amusement. "Indeed. But tell me, what other fascinating customs does your species have? Perhaps for next year's exchange, you could introduce us to another human sport or pastime." I thought for a moment, considering the possibilities. What other uniquely human activities could I introduce to the galactic community? Competitive eating? Extreme ironing? Cheese rolling? A mischievous grin spread across my face. "Well," I said, "have you ever heard of a little thing called karaoke?" The master of ceremonies tilted its gelatinous head. "Kara. Oak, is this another test of strength?" I chuckled, already imagining the chaos that would ensue. "Oh, it's a test of something, all right. Let's just say it involves vocal prowess, questionable music choices, and often a significant amount of liquid courage." The alien's tentacles quivered with excitement. "It sounds delightfully barbaric. I cannot wait to experience this karaoke at next year's exchange." As I watched the alien flutter away, no doubt to spread the word about this new human custom, I couldn't help but laugh. First arm wrestling, now karaoke. At this rate, we humans were going to turn the entire galaxy into one big frat party. But you know what? Maybe that wasn't such a bad thing. After all, if we could bring species together over something as simple as arm wrestling, who knows what other bridges we could build. As I made my way back to the bar, already planning my set list for next year's galactic karaoke debut, I couldn't help but feel a swell of pride. Sure, we humans might be deathworlders. We might be seen as brutish or primitive by some of the more advanced species out there. But we had something they didn't: an indomitable spirit, a sense of fun, and the ability to turn any situation into a party. Watch out, Galaxy. Humanity is here, and we're bringing the fun. Just maybe invest in some arm braces first.